So yesterday I was doing a teaching thing, and I had a conversation with another teacher, somebody who was interested in politics, which is not so common around here. He was actually Haitian, um, but very well informed about politics and culture and stuff. So, and he asked me what I thought of the war in Iran, and I used words like American imperialism, American aggression. He said, "Well, where are you from?" And I said, "California." And he said, "Well, that makes sense because in California they're leftists." And I said, "I am not a leftist, but I think that it's an interesting topic. I've actually been very critical of California. I call it crazy California. But when it comes to foreign policy, of course, I am indebted to the left-wing historical research of the Cold War period because it was mostly scholars on the left that were writing about like U.S. intervention in Central America, U.S. intervention in East Timor, stuff like that. But I would argue that now, especially since the end of the Cold War, that's really become the position that these people, scholars, were taking about the Cold War. It's really become mainstream history. The only people during the Cold War that were writing about this stuff were scholars that were associated with the left, for the most part. But now there's been a lot of movies that have been made, like starting in the 90s, painting revolutionary movements in a sympathetic light, and there's been a realization in academia that there's more to the story than just the United States going in there and fighting communism, and that there's actually a lot, if not the majority of what was painted as communist was really just reformist doctrine, democracy in action. Okay, so I kind of situate myself more intellectually with kind of the left-wing milieu, but there's a reason for that. It's very hard to talk about politics with so-called conservatives, people on the right, think David Horowitz, Norman Paul Horowitz, people like that, neocons. You wouldn't be able to have a conversation with so-called conservatives about American foreign policy, or they would just start insulting you. They wouldn't. They'd be attacking you personally. There's no like political theory that they operate on. It's just like America is a battering ram that we have every right to take over the world. I mean, those aren't serious arguments for me. Now, there is, of course, the another side of American conservatism that's represented by like the Ron Paul, and even like the before that, like that Pat Buchanan kind of free marketeers, and of course now the children of the Ron Paul revolution, and you can talk to them and have a serious argument about history and economics, and they can follow a logical train of thought, can talk about political philosophy. But a lot of that side of American conservatism, which I also identify with, it's really underrepresented, and maybe that's changing now with the rise of podcasters like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. But it's very hard to actually flesh out what American conservatives believe, because there's, in general, like the kind of neocon conservatism which has dominated American discourse, for decades. It's very hard to know what they actually believe, because there isn't an emphasis in the understanding of history and what was going on during the Cold War, Latin America. If you talked about these things, they would just deny it. They don't know the difference between Iraq and Iran or El Salvador versus Guatemala. And any kind of conversation that you would have with them would be more like informative, like I'd be informing them, and then they'd be arguing with stuff that's actually settled history. So I have spent my time in politics more kind of within a left-wing milieu, because right-wing people just often they have it just a default position over which they can't go further. And one could actually say that it's this lack of curiosity and lack of political interest and engagement that produces right-wing thought. But I don't know that these terms like conservative or liberal even mean anything anymore. But there is something interesting when I'm talking with people that are on the left. My emphasis on, like what Peter Dale Scott calls structural deep events, my emphasis on false flag terrorism, on hijack narratives, on psychological operations, on CIA, drug dealing, 9/11, Oklahoma City, stuff like that. That, for a lot of people on the left, would put me outside they would tell me that that's actually a right-wing type of analysis. Why? Because it's a departure from the kind of Marxist, structuralist, class-based analysis that defines left-wing thought. And by me talking about crime and putting false flag events and crime, state crimes against democracy, structural deep events, by me putting that at the center, at the core of my analysis, they would really see that as a departure from left-wing thought. And it is. On the surface, it is kind of a departure. But it's through looking at bad actors and bad apples, criminal elements in the United States government, and events like 9/11, that we're, and I say we as a whole in society, are potentially able to really then identify these unjust structures. But a lot of the American left, they want to go in with a battering ram and just start with rich people are bad, redistribute wealth. And they don't even want to look at the possibility that 9/11 was an inside job. And now the 9/11 truth movement is characterized as a right-wing phenomenon. Although in the early days, like even the first 10 years, it was considered a left-wing movement. Now it's overwhelmingly considered something that's right-wing. Philosophically, a lot of this goes back to the belief and the ideology on the left that the only thing that matters is class structures and redistributing wealth and a focus on inequality. And something like 9/11 is a distraction from that. So I'm not really on the right or the left. I believe in making ideological coalitions and taking a bird's eye view. But a lot of people, they've never actually, especially in Latin America, they've never heard an alternative explanation for 9/11. They never heard that there could be another way of explaining the events. And an interesting hypothetical question to ask is, even of right-wing people who support the war in Iran, is if 9/11 was an inside job, just granting that for the sake of argument, how would we then label and classify all the wars in the Middle East that the United States has carried on since then? See, I don't think that those who hold to neoconservative views realize just how much 9/11 underpins their view of the world, their view of Israel, their view of Islam. These are important questions to ask. So I had a university professor tell me once, why do you go down a blind alley? Why do you take this road with protesting 9/11? Why do you carry a sign that says investigate 9/11 when the crimes of the Bush administration are in full view for all to see? In the hundreds of thousands dead Iraqis, that's arguably much more criminal than just, a few thousand dead on 9/11. And while that argument may be convincing to her, if you want to reach Mr. and Mrs. America and the girl behind the checkout counter, absolutely 9/11 is the way to go. As Dr. Kevin Barrett said, it's the Christmas gift which just keeps on giving. And this shows the kind of elitist mentality of the American left versus the populist mentality, which is another way that I part roads with a strictly left-wing analysis, is that they care about what they've been focusing on all this time, which is structural inequality, but they don't care about what is important to Americans. Now, obviously, who carried out 9/11, who done it, that's much more important to Americans, average Americans. It has the potential to galvanize Americans in a way that a structuralist analysis, a class-based analysis just isn't. That's never going to have the traction. And you also I saw this elitist mentality with Chomsky when I was emailing him. Started out as his biggest fan, and then our emails started to have to focus on some of our disagreements. I didn't engage with him a lot, but I had some back and forth with Noam Chomsky. Arguably the most important or most recognized peace activist of the 20th century. And he said that I suggest you study the way we did things in the 1960s, and what else did he say? Well, he said in interviews that I'm paraphrasing now, but the gist of it was we've spent all this time building up these left-wing movements, and now these 9/11 people are going to come in and take everything from us. He wanted to be the Pope of the American left, and then we saw people rising that were focusing on 9/11, and there was a lot of jealousy. So after 9/11, when all the political documentaries started coming out, a lot of these are now just forgotten documentaries about September 11th being an inside job. I really thought that with time, these things would reach critical mass, and there would be an awakening, and bridges would be built, ideological bridges in the United States. But I underestimated just how intense the rivalries and the competition is within the alternative media, and how they all really hate each other, and everybody's got their angle that they're sticking to and trying to be unique, and it's really sad. Having done this for a long time, but never really in the public sphere, just very, very minimal, and doing it as my goal has never been popularity. My goal has been to create art and to be the best journalist and to research these things as a lover of history and sociology and political philosophy. I've never become ideologically entrenched in just one position. And it has allowed me to take a bird's eye view. So that's what I have to offer.